Hello! I have a couple of mystery packages to open today. The big one sent by a viewer, and the smaller one is a subscription I bought for this year, so I'm going to check out what's inside both of them. Let's get into it! Starting off with this subscription bag, which I've already opened and had a sneak peek inside. It is by the company Derivan, and quite a long time ago I got a free sample by them, this Matisse structure in Mayan Violet, and I've never opened it. Well, this subscription is the Matisse Masters, and it comes out every 2 months. It cost me 77 Australian dollars for the year, so about $12.80 a package, I think. The jury's out on whether it's worth it. We'll find out at the end of the year, but here is the first one they sent me. A teeny tiny black canvas, which I'll do something with eventually, although I didn't end up doing anything with it in this particular video. I'm presuming that's this month's accessory. And here are the 3 paint tubes that came in February's box, and one of them's actually an iridescent medium. The other 2 are Matisse structure acrylic paints. I don't own any of these except for these samples. I'm building my collection. The first tube is lemon yellow, and the one they've included is actually a rejected pigment that they were considering because it was too difficult to get. So they're basically saying that this is one that they're never going to put on shelf. And my guess is they're doing a sub box like this so that they can actually move these pigments on that they're not going to use, and I guess it saves waste, and now I've ended up with a paint that no one else is going to have except for those who buy the sub box. They've also included some iridescent medium, which usually comes in a big pot like this, but I'm glad I've got a little tube to try out and see if I like it. As for Australian salmon gum, there was no information printed about this. I'm assuming that's one of the readily available colours in their range. Okay, I just looked up a chart and yes, it is on there. If I remember, I'll put a link in the description below so you can see all of the colours in their range. So price-wise, this boils down to $4.20 per 12mm tube, plus that canvas. Is it worth the money? It seems reasonable, but I'm kind of still on the fence about that. I think I'm going to decide that later in the year, once I've received some more packages. Speaking of which, I have this big one to open. And this is by a viewer. Thank you so much. You know who you are. I really appreciate it. I had no idea what was in here, but she's only gone and sent me some more of my favourite Cancer Moulin de Roy paper, which I think is only available at Jackson's Art. I had finished the green pad of paper, which is the cold press, and she'd seen that, so she sent me some more. These pads are a size A4, which is perfect because I have folios that hold my A4 artworks, and it just works out so well. I'm really excited about these. I'll put them to one side, and let's see what's in this box. I had absolutely no idea. I wasn't expecting this at all, and while I struggle to get it open, I just want to thank all of you amazing viewers who are so incredibly supportive to us art tubers. Through your views and comments and likes, clicking on affiliate links, all of these things go so far at helping us to keep our channels going. Oh my gosh, there is what looks like a Daniel Smith tube in here, and sure enough it is. I cannot believe someone bought me some Daniel Smith. It is a gouache in cobalt teal blue, and you know I've just released a video swatching out all of the other gouaches that I had in that introductory set, so the timing of this was exquisite. Here are the other tubes I have. It's a very limited amount so far. I've got 3 primary colours and a black and a white. And I said in that video that this palette is somewhat limiting, so a cool teal blue is a welcome addition to the warm ultramarine blue, and it's going to widen this palette's range already. Now, I'd deliberately left space in my swatch book so I can add some more colours in over time. I wasn't expecting to do this so soon. Anyway, there's a bit of paint in the lid, so I just figured I'd use that and paint it out onto the page. This one is wonderfully opaque, and it is such a pretty colour. I did pick up some water on my brush so I can spread it out a bit and see what it looks like in a slightly more diluted manner. The colour is so intense, and cobalt teal's one of my favourite colours. It's a PG50 and it's a wonderful pigment. It's extremely granulating, and it leans towards the cool side into the green just slightly. And apparently I'm moving on to the other paints, which I decided to swatch out on the next page, so I can flip between one page and the other. My swatch book is already completely out of order. Never mind. Okay, I had a problem with this Matisse paint. You could see it's got a metal seal over the top, and there is nothing on the lid that's pointy which can poke a hole into this, so I was just rummaging around to see what I had, and of course shops, my metal pokey tool had disappeared and wasn't where I usually keep it, but I found this somewhat blunter wooden tool, and yeah, this was a really bad idea, as you're about to see. The paint exploded out of the tube, and I'm just going, what do I do with it? Because it's acrylic paint, as soon as that dries, it's not going to re-wet again, and I really didn't want to waste it all. So 1 second, I set up an emergency wet palette so I can blob all of this paint out onto it and it will stay wet for as long as I need. Wet palettes are the best things for acrylic paints. If you haven't got one, I highly suggest getting one. It makes acrylic painting so much better. Oh my gosh, what a mess I made. So this one's that lemon yellow, which they're not going to actually sell in shops, and I'm painting it out now. It's a really vibrant, pretty colour in PY175, which isn't going to be in their range, and I looked up on the colour chart. It doesn't seem like they actually have a lemon yellow at the moment, so they must be still developing this one. But even though it's a rejected pigment, it works really well as a lemon yellow. And the next one here is that Australian salmon gum, and I'm expecting this one to be some sort of pink. It's got violet pigments in it, but sure enough, it's a pinky colour, and this one didn't make quite as much mess because I was more gentle with it. My paper had wrinkled up because I was rushing to get this out, but there we go, it will still work. It's a lovely looking colour, and this one is in their current colour range because I can see it on the chart. So I'm guessing by structure they mean heavy body paint. It does look like it has a fairly heavy body to it, and this Australian gum is a nice opaque one as well, whereas the lemon yellow was very much a transparent colour. Australian salmon gum is a mixture of two violets, PV19 and PV74, and some titanium white PW6, which explains its opacity. Really pretty colour, I like that one a lot. Next up we have the iridescent medium, which usually comes in a big pot. I thought this was just going to have that white lid on there, but no, it's got the metal cover as well. That's so annoying. I understand why they do it, to seal the acrylic paint in and make it airtight, but they just explode when you open them. Oh gosh, I made a mess of that one too. It would definitely be easier to get that one out of a pot. Anyway, I've put out everything that exploded onto the wet palette, and I'll paint some on here. I coloured half of the swatch black so I can see what it looks like on black as well as white. It's an iridescent paint, it's quite milky, and it looks like the Stuart Semple unicorn milk, if you've ever seen that. This is actually meant to be mixed into acrylic paints to make them iridescent, so it's a medium rather than being a paint on its own. But it's very pretty, I like it a lot, and I will have to try mixing it into some other paints. Look how shiny it is, I really like that. So those were the three that came in the subscription box, or pouch, but I also have this free sample that I received at another time, and you can see I haven't opened this one either, so joy, we're getting to do this one on camera too. I made such a mess, it would not go in there, it was really stubborn. So I pushed very hard and the stick went the entire way into the tube. Can I possibly make any more mess? I don't know. But this one is Mayan Violet, and I think it's a series 5, so it's a pretty expensive pigment. I'm not seeing this one either on the chart, so I don't know if it's a limited edition colour or something. I have no memory of why I received that sample. It was a few years ago, and you probably saw briefly that I had paint all over myself, which is situation normal. Anyway, this Mayan Violet PV58 series 5 is a bluish purple colour. It's quite transparent, and I was just testing out painting it dilute with water as well as dark. It's very pretty, and I found an information page on it, so I'll link that in the description below, hopefully. And for the purposes of the video, I thought I'd paint a tiny swatch of the cobalt teal blue on this side, so you can see that Daniel Smith gouache colour with the acrylic paints here, and this is the colour palette that I'm going to be working with today. It's actually a really good one, because I had a whole bunch of paint left in my wet palette and I really don't want it to go to waste, so I figured I'm doing my artwork today. The only trouble is I hadn't planned for this at all, and I had no clue. I was sitting at my computer just going, I have absolutely no idea what to paint with those colours, but I looked up at my calendar. This year I've bought a Vasily Kandinsky calendar, and I was thinking this artwork was giving me some inspiration. I then remembered I have a Kandinsky book with the same artwork on the front cover. How funny is that? But these colours actually kind of go with this particular painting that he did. And I was thinking maybe I could paint something like this. Maybe not exactly the same, I didn't want to copy it exactly, but I had a little flip through the book to look at some of his other work. Now, I'm not usually into modern abstract art, but I've always really liked Kandinsky's work. A lot of his pieces are very colourful, and I really like the geometric shapes. They just appeal to me somehow. And quite often in my sketchbooks, I'll end up with these little shape pictures like this, so I find him quite inspirational. I just really love the colours more than anything. You know I love a bright colour palette, and these two paintings remind me of reverse colouring pictures. If you've seen those around, I've done a little bit myself, and I might be doing a bit more in the future, but I'm so glad I bought the Kandinsky calendar this year, because that then reminded me that I have the Kandinsky book, and then I got some inspiration for today's painting, because honestly I was blanking on this. Usually I'll study the swatches and then come up with an artwork, but because all the paint had exploded out, I kind of needed to use it, so I was rushing a bit. I really love the concentric circles artwork. That's one of my favourites of his. I'll put a link to an info page about Kandinsky as well. But let's do some art. Now, I still have some of the hot press Cancer Moulin de Roy that the viewer sent me the previous time, so I figured I probably should use that up first before opening new pads of paper. The hot press is, of course, a lot smoother than the cold press. I don't think to use it as much as I do cold press paper, but actually the Moulin de Roy hot press is really lovely as well. And I've actually taped a border around the edges of this, which I don't normally do, but I felt like it needed one today. Now, I'm just going to come up with my own Kandinsky rendition using the cover page art as my inspiration. So I'm doing a little bit of this in real time, and I'm just painting out some random swatches of water onto the paper to wet some of it but not all, and my camera kept going out of focus there, which is super annoying. But I decided to start off with the gouache. I want this to be my base, and then I'll paint the acrylics over the top of it. And I had no idea what I was doing here, just so that you know. I just started swiping that paint on. Some of it you can see is running in the water, and then in the dry areas the paint will go down more sharply. So I was just playing around with brush strokes here and enjoying the gorgeousness of this cobalt teal blue. It's such a beautiful colour. I felt like the small brush wasn't giving me the flow that I wanted, so I've moved to this much larger brush, and I'm gently blending the gouache out with a bit more water, just so that I can get a lot more colour on the paper, and also so I can get some more granulation, because it's a lot easier to see it when the paint is diluted out. But otherwise, I really wasn't planning any of this. I was painting intuitively, just letting the colour go down where it felt like it needed to be, and this is so much fun. I highly recommend doing this if you can't think of anything to paint. Just start brushing colour onto paper and something will eventually turn out of it. Maybe that's why Kandinsky did a lot of the type of work he did, because he just couldn't think of what to paint, and so he just ended up doing all these wonderful abstracts. And I don't know if his paintings have some sort of deeper meaning to them, or if he was just relaxing and enjoying himself like I was here. There is no deep concept behind this painting, no existential crisis or juxtaposition of light. It's just beautiful cobalt teal being spread out onto the paint, plus I was trying to use all of it up as well because I didn't want to leave any on the wet palette. I find that gouache, when it goes on a wet palette, will dilute out completely and it turns into a runny mess. Acrylic paint tends to hold its shape a lot better on a wet palette. I'd gone back to the smaller brush and I was just painting marks onto the page, going over some of the wet areas, and you could see some of the paint dispersing out. It was so satisfying to watch. And this year I've really been trying to get back into the pleasure and fun of making art, rather than it being such serious business. I just want to enjoy it and experiment with colours to see what crazy things I can come up with. My brush slipped and I accidentally picked up some of the yellow paint. It's mixed in with the gouache, and yes, gouache and acrylic will mix together because they're both water-based paints. You could mix watercolour with acrylics as well, or watercolours and gouache. It doesn't really matter. Just remember that acrylics will dry and never re-wet, whereas this kind of gouache and watercolours will reactivate in water. I painted on some unintentional green lines here, And I was actually starting to think a little bit more about the composition of it, and I'll talk about that a bit more. But here's the gouache once it's fully dried. You can see that incredible granulation, especially on the left-hand side down there. It's such a stunning paint. I am so grateful to receive this paint from the viewer. Thank you so much. And now it's time to go in with the acrylic colours over the top. You can see how transparent that lemon yellow is, and that was perfectly fine because then I could see the lines coming up underneath, and they've gone green again, but I think it adds quite a lot of dimension to the paint. In contrast, the salmon gum one is so much more opaque, and that just went right over the top of the teal without any of it showing through. I'll come back to that C shape in a little while because I didn't really like it in the end, but I left it there until I could think of something. My painting is completely different to Kandinsky's one, but I did have it in front of me and I was referring to it just to get the idea of the lines and shapes that he was using and seeing what I could come up with. For my composition, I was trying to think about balance, and so I was strategically placing some of these lines so that the whole thing would kind of join together and be one cohesive piece. It's so hard to explain what's going on in my head sometimes. What you can't see is me actually gesturing with my hands at the moment because I was trying to explain what I was feeling, but you sort of get the idea, hopefully, that I am balancing out the lines, so I'm putting yellow on one side but also the other side as well. I think this actually was quite successful. I decided I couldn't be bothered mixing in the iridescent paint to the other one, so I'm just painting it over the top of everything and giving it a little bit of sheen here and there. You can see it showing up quite well, although in some areas it does disappear, but when you hold it in the light you could see it show up, so that's quite nice. As I mentioned before, I'm not entirely sure what I think of the subscription value yet. I really do need to receive a few more of these, and I'll probably show them on camera. I'm not sure if I'll do them every single time I get one or if I'll keep a couple of packages to open at once. It'll just happen when it happens, but I will definitely show you everything that I get this year, and we can decide together whether it's actually worth it or not. The last thing I did was grab a thick black pen and draw some black lines on here because that's what Kandinsky had on his painting, and I thought it would be a nice dark value contrast in comparison to all of the other paints, which are mostly light except for that Mayan blue. The Derivan Matisse structure paints seem to be nice quality. I don't have a lot of experience with acrylic paints, but I'm glad to be trying out a product that I'd never used before, and it's also great that it's an Australian company because I'm really hoping to explore some more Australian art supplies. We make so many of them in this country, it's quite surprising, and it's quite an untapped resource for me when making new videos. Maybe I'll get a chance to collaborate with some of these Australian companies to try out their products if they send them to me. I'm always hopeful for that. But anyway, now I've got to peel off the tape, and this is why I tend not to use it because I always rip the paper. It doesn't matter what I do. And of course I forgot the hairdryer method again, so you don't have to remind me. I know what I did wrong here. But I managed to peel it all off in mostly one piece. It did take a fine layer of paper off though, and I think it tends to do that more on hot press paper rather than cold press. Never mind, we'll get this paper off. That's always satisfying, just watching those lovely sharp lines appear once the tape comes off. None of the paint leaked under the tape, which is an added bonus. That usually happens to me as well. While I was doing this, I felt like I was being watched, and sure enough, there was Gandalf just peering over this chair at me. It was so disconcerting, but at least it wasn't a ghost or something. And of course I turned away for 2 seconds and he materialized on my desk. Always when I'm doing a painting, I try to move that out of the way before he stood on it. Why do they always have to do that? They know when it's the least opportune time for them to be there, so they can achieve maximum annoyance levels. But it's so hard to stay mad at that face, and it was my own fault for leaving the door open, I guess. Anyway, back to the painting. Here is the finished artwork, a Kandinsky. I actually really like how it turned out. It was so much fun, and I love the colours together. The palette that I ended up with is nice and cheerful. The acrylics work well over the top of the gouache, and that cobalt teal blue colour is so stunning. You can also see that iridescent paint shining in the light there. It's really lovely. So this one was a completely impromptu video, but I ended up with an artwork, and I'm really happy about that. So what do you think of all the supplies and my painting? Is that subscription worth it? I'm going to have a whole bunch of these tubes by the end of the year, It'll be interesting to see what colour palette I end up with all of the tubes. Will it be a conventional one, or just completely random? I'll have to do a painting with a full year's subscription, won't I? So thank you again to the viewer who sent me the lovely cobalt teal and the watercolour papers. I will definitely be using those, and I'll just put that cobalt teal with my other gouaches in this little bag. I need to find a better container for this because the zip's broken, doll. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, and you might want to click subscribe for more videos. If you want to see the other gouaches swatched out, that video's here, and there'll be another one on this side. I hope you're having an excellent day, and I'll see you all again in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!